Hi there, everybody. Nice to see you. It was a beautiful day here in Washington, D.C. today. A little bit on the crisper side, but still very, very nice. I hope you had a nice day. I hope you've been adjusting to the bad news of last week. There was a lot of bad news last week. Absolutely a lot. Carmen said, finally got the alert tonight. Bonnie said hi. Kay said, hey, everybody. Lana's here. Dolores is here. Kay says we need to bail out the post office instead of cruise ships. Sandy Degg says, hi, Bonnie. Hi, everyone. And hello to you all. So tonight's topic is responding to the economic collapse. There's a lot of news on that front. Hi, Sharon Anthony Connors. And Askir Brinjar Torfassen. Hello to you. I'm guessing that's a very Nordic name. Carmen says, greetings. Finally got the alert tonight from Florida. Okay, so where are we? I guess the first order of business is please share, share, share as much as you can, and thank you for the sharing that you've done so far. And please don't forget occasionally to visit my Patreon page, which is at patreon.com/Joe_Firestone. Very easy to remember. Very easy to remember. So thank you. I see that my screen seems a little frozen. I guess it unfreezes also from time to time. So, of course, the mess we see before us today, the most important aspects of the mess, increasingly are the unemployment part of our crisis. So let's begin by taking a look at that. I told you last week it was going to be bad. A lot of people said it was going to be bad. And a news release came out, I guess finally, it must have been on Thursday. And the news release said, I'm going to have to make that larger, it looks like. Hang on while I zoom this a little bit up. Okay, hopefully that's good enough. But anyway, this is a news release from the Department of Labor on the impact of COVID-19. It was released at 8:30 a.m. on Thursday, April 9th. I would have told you about it on the evening of April 9th, except I decided to attend a phone call, an onboarding call, I guess it was, from the Movement for a People's Party. Maybe I'll get a chance to tell you about that as we move through tonight. Anyway, in the week ending April 4th, the advance figure for seasonally adjusted initial unemployment claims was 6,606,000, which was a decrease of 261,000 from the previous week's revised level. The previous week's level was revised up by 219,000 from 6,648,000 to 6,867,000. The likelihood is that the revised figure for this week is going to rise too, so maybe it won't actually be a reduction. But in any case, the bottom line is that over the past 3 weeks, ending in April 4th, there were close to 17 million new unemployment claims during that period, of time. And if I recollect correctly, there were 5 million people who were unemployed actually prior to that. So the U3 unemployment statistic, which is not reported in this particular release, has probably gone up to something like 22 million. For the week ending March 28th, the unemployment rate had gone up to 5.6%. That was an increase of 3.2 percentage points from the previous week. It's now gone up to, probably another 2%. It's probably I'm not sure what the rate is. I don't see the rate here. But I believe that with 22 million people unemployed, we're probably now somewhere in the range of 10 to 12% unemployed across the U.S. Maybe a bit wrong about that. I'm not sure what the figure is for the labor force right now, but I think it's already getting very close to 10%. And certainly if we have a similar results for the week ending today, the 11th of April, we're going to be past the high of the 10% unemployment figure that we saw after the crisis of 2008, 2009. So there was an article about that appeared in Common Dreams. And let me share that with you if I can get my scroll working here. I'm not sure what is with my display here. If you'll give me a minute, I'll adjust it. Here we are. There was an article in Common Dreams by Jessica Corbett on April 9th, which was Thursday. She described the development as absolutely staggering, and she put the 3-week total of unemployment claims, new unemployment claims, to 16.8 million, meaning about 10% of the workforce has become jobless during the coronavirus pandemic. That's true, and since we started out with something like 3.5% unemployment, wait until I see the official rate. Let's just take it at 10% for now. I think it may be a little higher than that. There are various statements about that in this article. Heidi Shierholz of the Economic Policy Institute tweeted, "Look at this, between March 15th and April 4th, 16.8 million people, workers, 16.8 million workers applied for unemployment insurance. That is more than 1 in 10 workers. And we're nowhere near the end of this. The labor market has been upended," said Heidi Shierholz. She also said each and every one of the nearly 17 million workers who applied for unemployment in the last 3 weeks is a person, a family, experiencing a life crisis. The scope of suffering is overwhelming, right? We don't hear that, of course, from Donald Trump. All he does is talk about how great we're doing and how there are only going to be 60,000 people in the end who are likely to die from this crisis. While there seems to be a general consensus that the number of Americans who have filed for unemployment benefits over the past few weeks is truly shocking, but Gould, who was a colleague of Shierholz, and Heidi Shierholz, explained that the Department of Labor figures underrepresent how many people nationwide are currently jobless because of the public health crisis. End quote. The unemployment claims figures in recent weeks don't include people who aren't eligible for regular unemployment insurance, but are nevertheless out of work due to the virus. People like independent contractors, like the Uber drivers, for example. Those who had to quit work to care for a child whose school closed, and those who don't have work histories that are long enough. They said, quote again, "In other words, coronavirus job losses are greater than what today's numbers show." And Gould and Shierholz warned that millions more Americans are expected to lose their jobs as the crisis continues. And that has implications for health care. In the middle of a virus outbreak that has infected over 432,500 people and killed at least 14,830 nationwide. And by the way, as of today, we had now passed 20,000 fatalities in the United States. And I think the number of new cases, or the number of cases, I should say, was now up to 850,000 because we are testing a lot more. We're getting better at testing. and doing it faster. Meanwhile, Trump is telling people we don't have to test. But anyway, based on GDP forecasts, we project that near-term job losses could easily exceed 20 million, even with relief measures already in place. And that estimate will increase in coming weeks if GDP forecasts deteriorate. And workers aren't just losing their jobs. Given that our healthcare system ties health insurance to work, millions of workers likely lost their employer-provided health insurance at the end of March. Millions more will follow this month and in coming months. Study published Tuesday in the Annals of Internal Medicine, the official journal of the American College of Physicians found that layoffs from the pandemic have already caused more than 1.5 million people in the U.S. to lose their employer-provided health insurance, and projected another 5.7 million Americans could lose coverage by the end of June. So we're talking about 7.2 million people projected to lose their health insurance by the end of June. There's also another projection, at the end of June, and that projection is from the Fed, and it says that 32% of the labor force are going to be unemployed by the end of June. These figures provoke fresh calls from the progressives in Congress to pursue policies that would provide everyone in the country with immediate relief from the outbreak of the virus, including cash transfers of $2,000 per month and the suspension of rent and mortgage payments, as well as long-term health and financial security, such as is provided by Medicare for All, a federal jobs guarantee, and a Green New Deal. People for Bernie tweeted, 10% of the labor force is now out of work. 10% is the number of unemployment websites crashing, not including freelance, underemployed, and more. We need Medicare for All now, provide $2,000 a month for everyone, suspend rent and mortgage immediately, get paid sick leave, give paid sick leave to all. And this is the worst unemployment rate since the Depression of the 1930s. Eric Holthouse says, what are we fucking waiting for? We need a Green New Deal. According to the EPI economist, quote, the next relief and recovery package should provide aid to state and local governments, extend unemployment insurance benefits, and provide better protections for workers. They should also incentivize employers to keep workers on payroll so that as few families as possible face the often lasting economic consequences of job loss, so that more businesses will be able to quickly reopen when the lockdown is over. And importantly, we cannot turn off federal government relief too early. At this point, it appears that even under the best case scenario, a rapid bounce back in the second half of the year, the unemployment rate will still be close to 10% in the fourth quarter of this year. I think that's highly wishful thinking unless we see some policy action. If the federal government leaves it here, if Congress leaves it where it is now, we're very unlikely to have an unemployment rate that's anywhere close to 10% in the fourth quarter of this year. The Associated Press reported Thursday that the U.S. unemployment rate could hit 15%, a number last seen at the tail end of the Depression when the figures for April come out. Yes, it could hit 15% when the figures for April come out, but by the end of June, it's predicted to be 32.5%, almost double what we'll see by the end of April. And Matthew Iglesias of Vox, co-founder and senior correspondent said, this is really bad. We're in worst unemployment territory since the Depression. And so that's the unemployment story for the United States. Of course, it's bad in a lot of the world as well. But I'm not going to cover that in this particular live stream. But I want to get to the reaction of the progressives. So another article in Common Dreams, the Progressive Caucus demands Pelosi unveil a bold coronavirus package that includes $2,000 monthly cash payments and vote by mail. These are demands coming from the Congressional Progressive Caucus, the CPC. They were delivered by Representative Pocan, a Democrat of Wisconsin, and Jay Powell, Democrat of Washington, the two co-chairs of the CPC. CPC is calling on House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to meet the coronavirus with the urgency it deserves by advancing another sweeping stimulus package that, unlike the previous business-friendly legislation, guarantees economic security for all, protects public health, and ensures election safety. It would have been far better to achieve this end goal if the CPC had originally called on Nancy Pelosi to do something like this and had threatened to vote against any package that did not do something like this because, of course, she gave much too much away in compromising with the Republicans on the earlier bailout packages, insisting she would get to economic security for all at some later time. And now much of the leverage she had, that is not doing anything for the big corporations, has been lost because she already compromised with them, because, of course, she's so wonderful at negotiating with them. Quote, CPC people said, our actions can now lay foundation for a just and resilient recovery, but only if we recognize the scale of this unprecedented crisis and fashion a response that meets that scale, unquote. The 24 members of the executive board of the CPC wrote in a letter sent to Pelosi on Thursday. By the way, I remind you, at one time, Nancy Pelosi was one of the founders of the CPC. How times have changed. With the U.S. economy rapidly deteriorating as the coronavirus continues to spread, nearly 17 million Americans filed jobless claims between March 15th and April 4th. I've gone over that already. To ensure that Americans will not have to wait for further congressional action if the economic and public health crisis deepens, CPC called for a legislative package that contains automatic triggers so that we continue with assistance based on economic conditions throughout the duration of the pandemic. CPC's list of demands includes monthly direct cash payments of at least $2,000 to every adult in the U.S. and an additional $1,000 for every child for up to a year. Now that's much more significant than anything we've had so far. And a moratorium nationwide on all evictions and foreclosures. Maybe Trump ought to pass that, because who knows, when the Depression hits his hotels, he might be on the list for evictions and foreclosures. He's had them before, I believe. At least $30,000 in student debt relief. Suspending collection of all consumer debt, including medical debt. Opening Medicare to all people who are unemployed and uninsured. Ensuring that no one in the U.S. faces out-of-pocket costs for COVID-19 treatment. increasing federal nutrition assistance payments, that's SNAP, of course, creating a federal paycheck guarantee program to stop mass layoffs, and guaranteeing a nationwide vote by mail to make sure elections don't contribute to the spread of COVID-19. And the CPC's full letter, is below. I've linked to this article so you can read the full letter if you want to later. CPC's letter came as Pelosi signaled Thursday she may not return the House to session before the end of April. I think we have to call our congressmen and tell them that they had better get on Pelosi's butt to get the House back way before the end of April. We're in the middle of an unemployment crisis, and people cannot wait. And a healthcare crisis, because the two go together. People cannot wait for Congress to act further. Now, we have a situation where Mitch McConnell is out of session until April 20th. I think Pelosi better get her butt back by April 15th so she can start working on a better bailout bill for people by the 15th before McConnell gets back with the Senate and structures something else that he tries to jam down her throat at the end of April because she's not here. And while she's at it, she ought to provide for remote voting in the House so things can get passed without everybody being here. Because the Speaker and other congressional leaders have refused to allow lawmakers to vote remotely, keeping the House on recess could significantly delay or prevent passage of another major stimulus package. I would say stabilization package. We're not talking stimulus now. The economy's collapsing. We need stabilization. And the article reminds us unanimous consent would be required for the passage of any legislation while the House is out of session. And we're not going to get that because Thomas Massie and other people will rightly demand that people come back to Washington to vote and be recorded. Now, they got away with not having a recorded vote for the earlier bailout bill, for the CARES bill, and we still don't know how people voted. In particular, there's some confusion over how Ocasio-Cortez voted. She hasn't made a flat statement that she voted no on the bill, but she's making more ambiguous statements leading people to believe that she did vote no on this bill. Just for the record, we'd like to know whether she voted yes or voted no. She did make an impassioned speech against the bill, but that doesn't mean she voted no on it. And Bernie Sanders made an impassioned speech on the floor too, but he voted for the bill because he wanted to get some money to people. I'd like to know how Ocasio-Cortez voted, and the rest of the squad for that matter. And right now, I don't think we do know. Anyway, quote, we're not there yet, and we're not going to be there no matter how many letters somebody sends in, with all the respect in the world for that, unquote, said Nancy Pelosi of remote voting during a call with reporters on Thursday, expressing concerns about the security of the process. I think people better get on Nancy Pelosi's butt too and say not having remote voting during this pandemic is intolerable. It's intolerable. We want the remote voting. We want people to have to go on record. We want to hold them accountable. And we're going to hold her accountable if the transparency is not there. People should tell her that from all over the country. There'd be nothing quite as effective to get her moving as to raise $10 million for Shahed Buttar. So she knew that her challenger was adequately funded for the upcoming campaign. In a series of tweets on Wednesday, Representative Ro Khanna, one of the signatories of the CPC letter to Pelosi, said arguments against remote voting don't, quote, hold up to reality, unquote. They certainly don't. Quote, Congress has to remain operational through national disasters, said Ro Khanna. Quote again, we need remote voting to ensure our democracy remains functional, unquote. We certainly do. As Common Dreams reported on Thursday, progressive advocacy groups are warning Pelosi and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer against accepting severely inadequate half measures which are proposed by Republicans and the Trump White House. Senate Democrats on Thursday morning blocked an attempt by Mitch McConnell to ram through a GOP-crafted measure that would have provided an additional $250 billion for a faltering small business loan program, but no direct relief for workers or the unemployed. That was good that they turned that down, because it's true, the Republicans want that, and so the Democrats have some leverage to get what they want in return for giving the Republicans that. Meanwhile, small business is hurting very, very badly, and they're exerting considerable pressure on both the Republicans and the Democrats, because the $350 billion loan program, which was created as part of the CARES Act, isn't dispensing any money to people yet. It's got all kinds of applications. It hasn't moved yet, because the SBA is such a lousy part of the bureaucracy. It can't move fast. It hasn't gotten money into people's hands. The Senate Republicans subsequently blocked the Democrats' alternative legislations, which would have provided $250 billion for small businesses, as well as additional funding for hospitals, states, and federal nutrition assistance. And progressives slammed the Democratic counteroffer as woefully insufficient and urged Pelosi and Schumer to use whatever leverage they have left to advance a sweeping relief package that puts people first, not corporations. We need more from Democratic leaders, Indivisible, Move On, and Community Change Action said in a joint statement on Wednesday. We call on Speaker Pelosi and Leader Schumer, boy, that's a laugh, isn't it? Leader Schumer, to use the profound power they hold in this moment to provide solutions that will save lives and help families survive this crisis. Yes. So that's one reaction of the progressives. Certainly a constructive one from our point of view. Now we'll move to another reaction, which was again covered by Common Dreams. Labor unions and small business advocates applaud Pramila Jayapal's paycheck guarantee plan to stave off the economic collapse. That was mentioned in the previous article, but not actually described. This article, there's a little more detail on it from Julia Connolly, staff writer. This was published on April 10th. There's a picture, of Jayapal. It was taken actually during an oversight hearing on February 8th, 2019. And so Jayapal on Friday called on the federal government to take bold and immediate action to ensure working Americans receive their paychecks for the duration of the crisis. The Washington State Democrat, a co-chair of the CPC, introduced the Paycheck Guarantee Act. So she introduced some legislation to allow both large and small businesses across the country to continue paying 100% of their employees' salaries of up to $100,000 annually. A plan similar to those that have been enacted in Denmark, the Netherlands and the UK, since the pandemic forced business around the world to shut down. Jayapal introduced legislation as the official unemployment rate in the U.S. hit, there it is, 13%, the highest it's been since the Depression of the 30s. Yes, the highest it reached, if I recall correctly, in the recession of 2009-2010 was 10.5%. And Jayapal said, mass unemployment is a policy choice. We can and should choose differently. And she was quoted by the Washington Post as saying that. She said a federal paycheck guarantee is a real solution that matches the scale of the crisis. There's a picture of Jayapal and Republican Senator Josh Hawley, who is a libertarian Republican senator, supposedly very right-wing, who on this and many other issues has views which are quite similar to some of the progressives. Hawley has a bill that he's introduced into the Senate, which would also provide for guaranteeing paychecks. Here it says that the details of the proposals are different, but the general concept is the same. Hawley's bill has been ignored in the Senate thus far. Hopefully, Jayapal's bill will not be ignored in the House. Under Jayapal's proposal, any company that suffered losses during the pandemic could be eligible for a grant covering 3 months of its base payroll, including salaries and benefits for employees. The companies could renew the grants after 3 months if the pandemic and business closures continue. The plan would also disincentivize layoffs or furloughs, with only companies that keep all their employees on staff during the crisis eligible for the grants. Okay, Jayapal said with the proposal would put the brakes on mass layoffs and economic decline and would enable a speedier and smoother recovery. And of course, she's absolutely right about that. She tweeted that out as well. The plan's already been endorsed by labor unions, including the American Federation of Teachers, Unite Here, and the SEIU. The Small Business Advocacy Group, the Main Street Alliance, which has raised concerns about the delayed relief businesses have been offered via loans through the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, called the Paycheck Guarantee Act, which I believe was part of. No, I guess this is called this Jayapal bill is the Paycheck Guarantee Act, but the PPP is a loan program that was part of the CARES Act, and which, thus far, has not been actually delivering any loan funding to the small business people who was supposed to be protecting the payrolls of these people with money from that particular program. Quote, the financial devastation of COVID-19 to small business and working people has been stunning and threatens to upend our entire economy, said Amanda Ballantyne, director of the Main Street Alliance. Quote again, we applaud Representative Jayapal's leadership in developing the Paycheck Guarantee Act, which provides a bold and workable solution that addresses the true severity, scope, and potential duration of the financial crisis that small business owners and their employees are facing right now. John Nichols, of The Nation, complimented the act and sent thanks to Jaya Powell and said she's bringing a wise and humane global response to the coronavirus pandemic. That's hashtag coronavirus pandemic. And the economic fallout from it to the U.S. Sorry. Clearing my throat. And the Progressive Caucus Action Fund said, marching towards mass unemployment as if it's inevitable makes absolutely no sense at all. The government is shutting down businesses. It should cover workers' paychecks and benefits. It's that simple. And that was quoted by We Act for Progress. I'm sorry, it was tweeted by We Act for Progress. And by Liz Schaff Watson, EDPCF. And that was quoted in Vox.com, actually. And this is a picture of Jaya Powell and Josh Mahoney once again with the caption, it's similar to a policy Denmark has already implemented to combat unemployment. According to the Washington Post, Jaya Powell's gotten a positive response regarding the legislation from Chuck Schumer, the majority leader of the Senate, and is planning to speak with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi about the proposal in the coming days. How about tomorrow? Well, the legislation has been endorsed by the CPC and already has several co-sponsors in the House, according to Vox. And the group Americans for Financial Reform said that Jaya Powell's act is necessary to provide small businesses with relief as federal loans have proven insufficient. Yeah, they're not out there yet. In the absence of action along the lines outlined in Jaya Powell's bill, said Policy Director Marcus Stanley, the likelihood of a Great Depression-scale economic catastrophe and disappearance of large swaths of the small business sector becomes even greater, unquote. And yet another article. I know I'm throwing these articles at you today, but it gives you the impression of what the scene is right now. How people are reacting and what they're doing. And I think you want to know about that. So on Friday, April 10th, Jake Johnson had an article in Common Dreams. One, Bernie Sanders and Pramila Jayapal put forth bill to provide no-cost, quote, health care for all during pandemic. So Bernie to the rescue also, as the number of Americans without health insurance continues to rise rapidly due to ongoing mass layoffs across the nation. Senator Bernie Sanders and Representative Jayapal on Friday introduced emergency legislation that would empower Medicare to cover all health care costs for the uninsured and all out-of-pocket expenses for those with insurance for the duration of the coronavirus crisis. So there's a sweetener for people who have health insurance already from other sources. They get their out-of-pocket expenses all covered. That is, their copays and their deductibles. Our broken healthcare system is failing to protect a huge number, actually millions of Americans from the coronavirus pandemic, said Jayapal in a statement, quote, now more than ever we need to take bold action to prevent Americans from getting sick or dying. If passed, the Healthcare Emergency Guarantee Act would take effect immediately and remain in place until the Secretary of Health and Human Services certifies to Congress that a Food and Drug Administration approved coronavirus vaccine is widely available to the U.S. public. There's a summary PDF regarding the legislation that's linked to in the article that was released by Bernie's office. And there's a quote from that, quote, would fully cover the cost of medically necessary health care, including prescription drugs, for the tens of millions of Americans currently without health insurance. Analysts by Health Management Associates earlier this month warned the total number of uninsured Americans could rise to 40 million within the next several months if the U.S. job losses continue at the current rate. I think it could rise a lot higher than that if unemployment goes up to 32%. For Americans with either public or private insurance, quote, the copays, deductibles, and other co-sharing for all medically necessary health care, including for prescription drugs, be covered by Medicare. The summary of the bill states, when individuals go to the hospital or doctor, they'll provide their insurance information as usual. The provider will use this information to bill Medicare, either for the out-of-pocket costs if the individual has another type of insurance or for all the care if the individual is uninsured. The patient will not be charged anything, unquote. Additionally, the legislation would ban surprise billing, no balance billing, and prevent private insurance companies from limiting coverage or hiking copays and deductibles until a COVID-19 vaccine is available. During this unprecedented crisis, no one in America should delay seeking medical care because of the cost, Bernie Sanders said in a statement. Quote, again, this pandemic has taught us anything, it is that we're only as safe as the least insured among us. And there were some other quotes, okay, from Bernie. And Time Editor at Large, Anand Giridharadas, said, quote, an interesting play, he tweeted that. Give people a taste of Medicare for all during this emergency while continuing to advocate for the real thing, unquote. But also, not only is Congress, or some people in Congress anyway, trying to come to the rescue, it is also true that the Federal Reserve is trying to come to the rescue. On April 9th, 2020, the Fed offered this news release up on your screen right now, or it should be if I've appropriately shared it. I haven't, sorry. I will have it shared in just a moment. There we go. Should be getting shared now. All right, it is. And it says the Federal Reserve on Thursday took additional actions. Let me increase the size of the type on this one so you can see it. The Federal Reserve on Thursday took additional actions to provide up to $2.3 trillion in loans to support the economy. Now, this is in addition to what was provided under the CARES Act. This funding will assist households and employers of all sizes and bolster the ability of state and local governments to deliver critical services during the coronavirus pandemic. Our country's, quote, our country's highest priority must be to address this public health crisis, providing care for the ill and limiting the further spread of the virus, unquote, said Federal Reserve Board Chair Jerome H. Powell, otherwise known as Jay Powell. Quote, once again, the Fed's role is to provide as much relief and stability as we can during this period of constrained economic activity, and our actions today will help ensure that the eventual recovery is as vigorous as possible, unquote. The Federal Reserve's role is guided by its mandate from Congress to promote maximum employment and stable prices, along with its responsibility to promote the stability of the financial system. In support of these goals, the Federal Reserve is using its full range of authorities to provide powerful support for the flow of credit in the economy. The actions the Federal Reserve is taking today to support employers of all sizes and communities across the country will, first bullet point, bolster the effectiveness of the Small Business Administration's Paycheck Protection Program, PPP, by supplying liquidity to participating financial institutions through term financing backed by PPP loans to small businesses. The PPP provides loans to small businesses so that they can keep their workers on the payroll. The Paycheck Protection Program Liquidity Facility, PPPLF, will extend credit to eligible financial institutions that that originate PPP loans, taking the loans as collateral at face value. So the loans collateralize themselves. In other words, no additional collateral is needed except for the note. Second bullet point, ensure credit flows to small and mid-sized businesses with the purchase of up to $600 billion in loans through the Main Street lending program. In the Department of Treasury, using funding from the CARES Act, will provide $75 billion in equity to the facility. So in other words, the $75 billion is there to back the $600 billion in loans so that the Fed will be guaranteed not to suffer any losses of assets as a result of its purchasing these bonds, which will be part of the lending program. Wait, is it bonds? I'm not sure. It's going to be bonds. I guess they're just going to do loans in this part of the program. It'll be loans to businesses. The Department of the Treasury, using funding from the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, the CARES Act, will provide $75 billion in equity to the facility. So that's for backing the losses that may possibly come out of this. It seems like a lot of money to back the losses, but okay. They're extending $600 billion in loans, and since that's coming through the Fed, it will be much faster than what's going through the SBA, because the Fed is very effective at getting reserves into people's hands, or businesses' hands. It does so basically by marking up accounts at banks. Next bullet point, increase the flow of credit to households and business through capital markets by expanding the size and scope of the primary and secondary market corporate credit facilities, the PMCCF and the SMCCF. Those are acronyms for two of the programs, as well as the Term Asset-Backed Securities Loans Facilities, the TALF program, which was a hangover from the Obama period. These three programs will now support up to $850 billion in credit, backed by $85 billion in credit protection, which was provided by the Treasury, which is being provided by the Treasury. So there's more money to the business bailout, but this will increase the flow of credit both to households and to businesses. Okay, but a lot of this is obviously going to be going to businesses. And so that's for them too, but I think this is much more for smaller businesses than for larger businesses. And of course, that's very important for keeping the economy intact. Now, here comes a very, very important part. This will help state and local governments to manage cash flow stresses caused by the coronavirus pandemic by establishing a I guess that's a municipal liquidity facility, MLF, that will offer up to $500 billion in lending to states and municipalities. That's the first time the Fed has done that. The Treasury is providing $35 billion, of credit protection to the Federal Reserve for the MLF using funds appropriated by the CARES Act. So Jay Powell is stepping up here to try to keep the economy liquid. And the news release goes further. The Fed further says the Federal Reserve and the Treasury recognize that businesses vary widely in their financing needs, particularly at this time. As the program is being finalized, we'll continue to seek input from lenders, borrowers, and other stakeholders to make sure the program supports the economy as effectively and efficiently as possible, while also safeguarding taxpayer funds. Comments may be sent to the feedback form until April 16th. To support further credit flow to households and businesses, the Federal Reserve will broaden the range of assets that are eligible collateral for the TALF program. The term asset liquidity, what is TALF? Yeah, the term asset-backed securities loan facility, the TALF program. Now, this is important that it's going to broaden the range of assets that are eligible collateral for TALF. As detailed in an updated term sheet, TALF-eligible collateral will now include the AAA-rated tranches of both outstanding commercial mortgage-backed securities and newly issued collateralized loan obligations. I'm not sure what that last actually means. The size of the facility will remain at $100 billion, and TALF will continue to support the issuance of asset-backed securities that fund a wide range of lending, including student loans, auto loans, and credit card loans. The MLF will help state and local governments better manage cash flow pressures in order to continue to serve households and businesses in their communities. The facility will purchase up to $500 billion of short-term notes directly from U.S. states, from counties with a population of at least 2 million residents, and U.S. cities with a population of at least 1 million residents. Eligible state-level issuers may use the proceeds to support additional counties and cities. In addition to the actions described above, the Federal Reserve will continue to closely monitor conditions in the primary and secondary markets for municipal securities and will evaluate whether additional measures are needed to support the flow of credit and also liquidity to state and local governments. Seems like the Federal Reserve doesn't want those markets to seize up and is doing whatever it can to stop the whole economy from collapsing. At this point, it seems like the combination of Jay Powell and the Treasury Secretary, that these two working together are working much harder than Donald Trump to try to keep the economy in some sort of reasonable shape. Now, the authority the Federal Reserve is using to do this is Section 13(3) of the Federal Reserve Act, with approval of the Treasury Secretary. Not just approval of the Treasury Secretary, but with the forwarding of some funds from the CARES Act in order to collateralize these loan programs, essentially leveraging the loan programs so the Federal Reserve can help the states and cities, and so that the Federal Reserve can help smaller businesses than is currently being done by the original $4.6 trillion slush fund, which is mostly going to larger businesses, and also the money that was going through the SBA, which has not actually gotten through there yet. So these are very good actions by Jay Powell. Now I want to skip to a discussion of those actions by Robert C. Hockett, who's a professor at Cornell University. He's a law professor. I don't know whether he has a degree in economics as well, but he may well have. He's a very good economist. And he's an MMTer, in fact. So here we go to an article appeared in Forbes, written by Robert C. Hockett. And Bob Hockett says, it's happened, and it has happened within the last hour. If you noted the time of the news release from the Fed on April 9th, it was just before the Hockett article was published. He couldn't possibly have had time to write it in that short a time, so he must have had some advance notice that this was going to happen. And he says, it's happened, and it has happened within the last hour. A new era of what I've called, quote, quantitative easing for communities, unquote, or, quote again, community QE, unquote, is upon us. It is now time for state and local officials to put it immediately to use. There is no time to lose. All states should call extraordinary legislative sessions at which local officials are brought in to weigh in or testify at once. In case you missed it, the Fed has announced this very morning that it is adopting extraordinary measures to open its Federal Reserve Act Section 13(3) lending facilities to the MLF, in other words, to cities and other short-term financial paper acquisitions for the duration of the present COVID-caused public health and financial crisis. With this, it is reaffirmed and indeed further built upon an expression of intention first made by Chairman Powell last month. The FOMC only yesterday, moreover, hinted strongly that it will stand ready to interpret remaining restrictions, of which there are certainly some, regarding the use of the 13(3) facility flexibly for municipalities until the present crisis is contained. It is critical for state and local officials across the country now to grasp the significance of this announcement immediately, with all deliberate speed, and to seize the remarkable new opportunity that it now presents. What the new announcement effectively means is that all U.S. states and their municipalities will begin to morph into something resembling dollar-issuing federal instrumentalities if and as the current crisis continues. They will now become something akin to full federal partners in addressing our national pandemic. They're effectively being both federally deputized and very soon now federally funded as if they were federal agencies empowered to conduct our nation's pandemic response. This is truly a, quote, game-changing, unquote, new opportunity where addressing the present crisis is concerned. Okay. I want to underscore what Bob said there. Okay. But till now, we've had a situation where basically Congress is deliberating over trying to do certain things, and the president is really saying very little and going along with deals being made by Mitch McConnell, okay, and Nancy Pelosi, while the governors, okay, of our various states, who must play an active role in meeting the crisis, but who have no financial wherewithal to do so, are now being given the financial wherewithal to basically go around Trump and slower moving people in the crisis. They're being given this wherewithal by the Fed and by the MLF, which is going to lend them at very low interest rates. I think probably using near zero interest rates. $500 billion to meet this particular crisis. And I believe, I'm not certain of this, it'll come clear as details of the program come due, but my understanding is that what will eventually happen is that the Fed will actually buy the securities that are issued by the local governments, okay, in order to fund this. That the Fed will stand by the funding of the securities, and may essentially buy the securities in the end. Whether or not any private sector people get involved in buying the state, okay, and local paper, I think the securities are intended to end up at the Fed, where if necessary, I suspect, it will be in a position to forgive those debts once the crisis is over. Now, I may be reading too much into this, but regardless whether I am or not, to provide this kind of credit facility for states and cities, one this large, $500 billion, would be enormously important to states that are having a rough time meeting their obligations to citizens of their states, okay, and meeting the needs. It will free them from having to pursue austerity policies in fighting the economic effects of the pandemic. This is really so important. And Bob says, it is also much more than a mere opportunity, however. when combined with the presently minimal role being assigned existing federal instrumentalities such as the CDC, also FEMA, and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, in addressing our present pandemic. It amounts to a responsibility and an imperative as well. It is literally incumbent on states and cities to begin issuing Fed monetizable financial instruments in such quantities as are necessary to fund all emergency measures that our states and cities are now left to their own devices to take. For again, they are for now our de facto federal disaster response agencies, because under Trump, to add to what is said by Robert here, because under Trump there is not much federal disaster economic response that's going on. Not from the CDC, not from FEMA, and not from the Army Corps of Engineers. So it's up to the states, and they haven't had the financial wherewithal to respond. But with the Secretary of Treasury and Jay Powell combining, now they will have a fund of $500 billion to draw upon to help to get us through this crisis. So this is very, very important. And Bob says, all state and local officials must accordingly begin developing crisis containment and reversal measures at once with the full and expansive mindsets of federal agencies, unconstrained by tight budgets of the kind state and local officials are more accustomed to working with. Austerity, quote-unquote, thinking is now, thanks to the new Section 13.3 facility, as unnecessary as it is dangerous. The Fed stands ready to dollarize, quote-unquote, state and local issuances. And this means, again, that our states and cities are now, in effect, being deputized, quote-unquote, as something very like de facto federal agencies with much of the authority and financing they need to do what federal agencies have done in past crises. It is also imperative in this connection, owing to size and number restrictions that come with the new Section 13.3 facility for now, specifically the number restriction here is the $500 billion fund, that each state and also by its municipalities coordinate in their tapping of the facility. Hence my call above to include city officials in the extraordinary legislative sessions that must begin now. So in New York State, Governor Cuomo should call together the legislature and the major mayors of the municipalities in New York State, including Bill de Blasio, to find out what the cities need and how it can be funded through the new facility. There will surely be additional, more detailed proposals, says Bob, forthcoming in the spirit of what is here urged, particularly as Congress is expected in coming weeks to supplement what the Fed is now doing by authorizing both A, the dispersal of more federal funding, and B, possibly further ahead, using digitized types of mechanisms of dispersal as well. In the event this happens, there will be renewed calls that ensure that all persons and businesses receive digital wallets or similar payment types such as prepaid debit cards for dispersal, receipt, and ultimately expenditure as well. Optimizing the new money issuance authorities opened up during this crisis will best occur by optimizing our national payment architecture as well. But more of that in due course. For the time being, it will be enough for all states and cities to begin drawing up their maximally serious, ambitious plans, again, with all deliberate speed, for the use of new federal funding facilities in manners well calculated to end and reverse the present pandemic and financial crisis at once. And so that was a pretty important article, okay, by Robert Hockett. It was in Forbes, so it received, I think, rather maximal exposure to the business community and probably to state officials as well. And it should get people going to make use of this particular facility and begin to meet some of the problems we have across the country, which the federal government has been slow in actually meeting up until now. So this is a very important article. You should read it for yourself. And should note the very important thing that it implies. So here we are. We're back. Okay, I am back to you. And I want to go to your comments. I do want to say one other thing, though. There's something else I'd like you to be thinking about, which hopefully we'll get a chance to go over, okay, on Monday. I've been thinking more about what we can do ourselves to stop what's coming, which is the terrible choice in the fall the two major parties will present us the choice of either Donald Trump or Joe Biden. Two unacceptable choices to most of us. So Bernie Sanders is committed to support Joe Biden by the agreements that he made, okay, with the DNC. And also by, it seems, his personal feelings towards Joe Biden, which go back, okay, a long way. And that's too bad. But we don't share those personal feelings. We don't share them at all. Carmen says, I haven't ventured out in a month. Is there any damn TP in the stores yet? Oh, toilet paper? I don't know. I haven't had to buy any in a month. I was lucky enough to have bought a package of toilet paper from Costco before this thing hit. And we still have plenty of that left. Excuse me. Carmen says, 666, Mark of the Beast. What is that? Carmen says, well, DT and other crooks better start sending out more checks then. Okay, so what are we to do about the terrible choice that we face in the fall? Last time we speculated about, well, maybe we get on the stick and we expose Joe Biden's record to everyone on social media. we develop a group that just focuses on telling the truth that Bernie would not tell, not that he lied, but that he was silent about during the campaign, the truths of Joe Biden's record over the years, which too many people in this country and too many people on the Democratic side are not yet aware of. Could the group that frequents this program, okay, the in-depth program, could we, through our efforts and through the impact of social media, spread this record around in such a way that over the next 4 months, we're able to circulate and get everybody aware of Joe Biden's true record, so that by the time of the convention, his poll ratings are so low that there would be no way that the party would choose to nominate him for president. So I'm asking you here and now, is that something that we could do? Is that something that we should do? And I see Carmen here, who's giving us the sentiment, Bernie, come back. Sandy says he just might. One condition under which he might is if we could expose Joe Biden's record to people. If we could do that. Carmen, and a federal jobs guarantee. A federal jobs guarantee indeed. But I think the primary task here is to drive down Biden's poll ratings. Can we do that? Carmen says, Adolf Hitler wants to reopen the economy by May 1st. That's way too soon. Of course it's way too soon. He's still downplaying the seriousness of this crisis for corporations and industries in lieu of slave wage lives. Yes. Let's hope that everybody short-circuits him. Rick says, damn, hi all, screen's all a blur. I have a lot to try and do tonight. Be safe and healthy, everyone. Take care. Carmen says, McConnell and those two libertarian buffoons, Rand and Massey, are holding everything back. I don't think it's just the libertarian buffoons. I think many more Republicans and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and many Democrats are also holding everything back. Sandy Degg says she needs to get on the stick. She needs to have her seat threatened by Shahid Buttar. Her poll numbers have to go down too. But for the time being, do we have a willingness to try to take down Joe Biden? Would we have enough people with ourselves and people we share with to get his record going viral between now and the time of the convention, okay, in August? By the way, we don't even know if it's going to occur in August. It may not occur until September. Sandy says, they're all on spring break. She's got no time for the peasants. If their office keep getting calls, and the calls build up heavily, with people calling for them to come back, she's going to come back. Carmen says, would Open Secrets have that vote information? No, they don't have the vote information. But Dave Dayen said AOC voted no on the corporate bailout. I know, but Nico House said She did not vote no on the bailout. He thinks she's lying about that. I didn't see any definite proof from him concerning that. However, The Intercept is trying to determine how everyone voted. Now, right now, they have her recorded as a no. But that's based on what she herself said, or what she implied when she was getting interviewed by Amy Goodman at Democracy Now! Carmen says, Shyster Schumer. No. Sandy says, how the heck do these waste of space people keep getting reelected? Carmen says, rigging, cheating, and gerrymandering. And he's absolutely right. Those exit polls are way beyond the margin of error. And also, systematically, that is systematic across states. If it were random, if it were random, it wouldn't be the proof. The proof is they're always against Bernie Sanders. They're never in favor of Bernie Sanders, those gaps, I mean. They didn't even have sense enough to occasionally put in one that was in Bernie's favor. They were too afraid of doing that. So everyone goes against Bernie. It's like in 2016, when the dice were flipped, the dies were flipped, were cast, okay, during the Iowa caucus. 6 out of 6 times, a decision went against Bernie Sanders. What was the probability of that? Well, these gaps, okay, in the exit polls are basically the same thing. If the gaps were random across the state, it wouldn't be like 6 out of 6 times. But we've got that with the exit polls too. Even in states where Bernie won, like California, the gaps between what the exit polls showed and what the actual count showed were way beyond the margin of error in California. Carmen says, but again, nothing for the homeless or those like me who are too sick to work but not dying enough to qualify for SSDI. Kay says, they want all we old seniors to just be poor and then die, Carmen. Sharon Anthony Connors asks, have you applied for SSI? And Gina Marie says, hello all. Hi, Gina Marie. Sandy says, hi, Gina. Kay says, hi, Stephen. Stephen DeVore has joined. Hi, Stephen DeVore. How you doing? And Carmen Muniz calls for elective calls for euthanasia. Then all this damn unnecessary pain and suffering make life hell anyway. Why hold on to your torment? Steve says, I haven't left the house except to go to doctor's appointments, and most of them have been by phone. Yes, I've had a doctor's appointment by phone now, yesterday, too. That was pretty good, actually. I actually did a pretty good job. I was pleased with that, because I didn't have to go anywhere. All I had to do was tell her stuff, and then she could tell me stuff. Carmen says 3 fucking times. I was denied 3 times. Sharon Anthony Connor says, I'm on my 3rd time now, extended indefinitely because of this damned nightmare. Carmen says, same, we could hold hands. Steve DeVore says, I'm really disappointed Bernie dropped out so early. I understand his reasoning, but I don't agree with it at all. Even still, he has an excellent chance at gaining the Oval Office seat, because I also don't think Joe's going to make it all the way to Election Day without blowing up and crashing. Say no to Joe. Well, Joe may not make it all the way to Election Day, but if he makes it all the way to convention, and through the convention, then he's going to be nominated. And he'll be the candidate for president, okay, the Democratic Party. If he then doesn't make it all the way to Election Day, then the DNC will have a meeting and they'll nominate someone else. And I doubt that it's going to be Bernie Sanders. So it's necessary that Biden tank actually before the convention, so that his poll numbers go down, and so that there's a positive collection of delegates by Bernie Sanders, even though he's not campaigning. We have to see that kind of thing. So the question is there sentiment here? Is there sentiment here for us to carry on a social media campaign to try to take Biden out? Lana Dell says you have to first produce Brad Pitt, Anna Convertible. And that's for a Thelma Louise type of gig. Laugh out loud, not in a voluntary program for euthanasia. And Carmen Mina says, I heard New Jersey allows it, but I don't know if it's just for their citizens. I'm sure it probably is. Carmen, most of those that are approved, you have to prove you are already terminally ill. Not really voluntary to just get out of the mess that has been made in this country. Now, you know what we ought to get the federal government to do? But to put together a fund so that those of us who are dissatisfied with the social safety net in this country would be able to move to other countries that have a decent social safety net.
Please.
A great big moving fund. It would probably cost a minimum of only $4 trillion. They can afford it. Steve DeVore says, except transferring the money into people's hands sure is taking a long time for this government. Who knows where most of us are? Sharon Anthony says, I'm an SSSI waiting on my third SSDI appeal.
Mm-hmm.
Why are they denying SSDI? That's strange. Carmen says, thanks. Well, the cancer is spreading down my arm. My feet are turning purple from diabetes. I'll be terminally every day now, but hell, then I'll finally qualify for SSDI and the pain meds. Kay says, well, my late hubby had terminal cancer almost everywhere. He was finally approved to get SSDI 3 months after he died. My God. Just another program ruined by the GOP and the corporate Dems. Sharon Anthony Connor says he did not drop out. He suspended his campaign. He's still on every primary ballot and can still collect delegates. Absolutely true. He can also jump back in if the situation changes. When jump back in means he can start campaigning again if the situation changes. I hope you voted or are going to vote for him. Carmen says, unfathomable and infuriating. Kay says, I already voted Bernie here in Ohio before this whole virus mess got so bad. Carmen says, yeah, why Hockett worked with progressive Warren is baffling in my view. I think Hockett was also working with Bernie as well. I think the MMT economists would work with both Bernie and or Warren if asked, course, Stephanie was committed to Bernie. But I certainly see her as perfectly willing to give advice to Presley, who would in turn convey that advice to Warren. And I know that Stephanie knows Warren anyway, because she certainly met her at a Levy conference that we had here in D.C. a few years ago, where both Stephanie and Warren were presenters at the conference. So Lana said, not anymore. They were friends from many years ago. This article Dr. Joe is reading is very important. I posted it everywhere. Hope you liked my commentary on it, Lana. I thought it was a very excellent article. And Steve DeVore says, the majority of us should have had that $1,200 in our banks by the first of the month. Absolutely. I believe once the bill was passed, there was 11 days before the first. No, I don't think there was 11 days before the first. I think they only got to passing it around 4 or 5 days before the first. We are already on the 11th, and bills aren't getting paid. That is true. Food isn't being purchased. Diapers aren't being bought. People are finding a new normal, and it's not good for many. It's not good for the economy either. They better act faster, or there's going to be hell to pay, says Steve. There is hell to pay. There's hell to pay right now. You see all these people coming off work. That's hell to pay. Carmen said this crisis would not have been this bad if DT would have acted in November when intelligence actually briefed him. And he's still downplaying everything. I know, he's downplaying everything right today. We're going to open up May 1st. It's already April 11th, but we're going to open up on May 1st. And in many areas, in the first areas of the country, we're just hitting the peak of the coronavirus right now. In the most advanced areas of the country, we've begun hitting the peak. The rest of the country is behind. I mean, it's not really in Cleveland in big numbers yet. I don't think it's in Chicago in big numbers. I don't think it's in Chicago and Texas in big numbers yet. I don't even know if it's in big numbers in Florida yet. It's in big numbers in New York. It's just beginning to grow here in the D.C. area until it's significant. We are nowhere near the peak in this country. I don't think we're going to peak in this country until maybe May 15th, if you take the whole country. And then you're talking about coming off the peak and the curve bending down. So there are very few new cases before the economy can be opened up. We have already 20,000 deaths. We have people dying now at more than 2,000 per day. Pretty soon, the number of fatalities, like in a matter of a few days, the number of fatalities from this pandemic each day will be as great as the number of fatalities from 9/11. We're talking here, we've already had 7 times 9/11 worth of fatalities from this pandemic. By the time it's over, well, I won't even venture a guess how many times more serious, than 9/11 this will be. Trump's performance makes George W. Bush's performance seem like a piker. I mean, it's Donald Trump who's the real merchant of death here.
No, he wants you to pay for your postal service.
Right. Now he wants you to pay for the postal service. Steve DeVore says, I said that with as much civility as I can muster. Why? Why? There's no obligation to be civil to someone who's not civil to you. I'm sorry. I don't think Trump is civil to anybody if he gets into an argument with him. All I have to do is mutter a criticism, and he's instantly extremely rude. He's like Joe Biden, but worse. And also Congress, who dumped their stocks instead of acting in the interest of the public. Some people in Congress dumped their stocks. The ones who had inside information dumped their stocks. Carmen says, Cora Emanuel, criminal. Not that Cora Emanuel is a criminal, but that what these members of Congress did was criminal. Steve DeVore says, we should have gotten second checks already if Trump had game, but all he does is play games. Steve DeVore says, I wonder what percentage of that money will be embezzled. Carmen Muniz says, he's too busy protecting his malignant, narcissistic mask from peeling off. The fucking sociopath. And Kay says, TYT, I just put up a video called Biden's Biggest Foe. Complete sentences. Laugh out loud. Sad but true. Steve DeVore says, not only Trump. I went too far. Wait a minute. Sorry, I scrolled down too fast, guys. I got to go back up. Wow, a lot of comments here tonight, folks.
We're going to be here forever.
Bonnie says we're going to be here forever. No, we're not going to be here forever. So now the question comes, do we set up a group? Kay says, any seniors or people of color that vote for Biden are nuts. They're not nuts. They're just low information voters.
Uninformed.
Low information voters, they're called. LIVs. They're lives. They're not nuts. Obama says left-wingers on FB can't, what? Can't affect shit. We'll see. We'll see. We're not going to be left-wingers, okay, on FB. I mean, all we're going to do... here we are. The only thing that we would do is inform people about Joe Biden's actual record. Just the facts, ma'am. Just the facts. Nothing but the facts. We won't call them names. We're not going to use guilt by association. We're not going to commit any logical fallacies. All we're going to do is report on what his record has actually been
The dates.
Over the years. And then we're going to ask people, why would you want someone with this record to be nominated by the Democratic Party as its candidate for the presidency? Does someone who has been so undemocratic over the years, someone who's acted so undemocratically, is that someone fit to be the nominee of the Democratic Party? That's the question we have to ask in the end, after we produce the whole factual record throughout Joe Biden's career. He can't run from his record if we expose it to people. Bernie would not do that. That was his failing. We have to make up for that. Sorry. My camera has gone south, but I will. Okay, I'm back. My camera momentarily went south, and I had to plug it in again into another port and instantiate it again. So, Carmen said because there's no leadership, Cora said, and also Congress who dumped their stocks instead of acting in the interest of the public. And Steve says we should have gotten second checks already if Trump had game, but all he does is play games. And Steve asked, I wonder what percentage of that money will be embezzled. Carmen said he's too busy protecting his malignant, narcissistic mask from peeling off. Oh, I read that before.
I thought we heard he only works an hour a day.
Somebody said, and Bonnie read, that Donald Trump only works an hour a day. Deborah Wilson says, nice talk. As always, Joe Firestone. Thank you, Deborah. Steve says, I'm still voting for Bernie. Me too. I'm still voting for Bernie
Me too.
And Sandy Degg says, bless you, Joe. Thank you, Sandy. And so Steve DeVore says, so Joe will be selling toilet paper for XXS? XXX, laugh out loud. I don't have that much toilet paper. I've probably got enough to last us another month or so.
Joey.
But I'm going to have to start to look around, see if the situation is easing. I mean, we were very lucky. That was totally unplanned. All we did was go to Costco and buy the normal amount that we usually buy. Just one of their big packages that they sell. That's all we did. We weren't trying to put anything aside. We weren't hoarding. We never hoard.
Only books.
Well, we don't hoard books. We have books, but we don't hoard books. Yeah, Bonnie says hoarding only
it looks
books.
like a hoard.
And she says it looks like a hoard. It's not. I've gotten rid of most of my books.
I know, Joy.
When we came to live here,
You
I
did
got
very
rid of
well.
most of them. When we moved out of the house, I got rid of half my books.
I know you did. Still looks like it though.
And Carmen Muniz, wow, so sorry. Joanne says, I'm so discouraged and depressed. I'll do what I can. Don't be discouraged, okay, and depressed. I know it's easy to say that. But the real important thing to say is that we have to fight. We just have to fight. We have to keep on fighting. That's the only way we can win.
You can still vote for Bernie.
We have to outlast these bastards. Steve says he's lost 15 points in the last 4 months and now sits tied with Trump at 42%. Deborah Wilson says, I'll do it. Sandy says, let's do it. Let's expose him. That's Joe Biden. I tried to expose his record, but only to my Facebook page. I'd be willing to try through a group, though. Well, what we would do with the group is we would coordinate. We would actually develop a list of the various things he's done on his record. The group would collate that particular list and prominently display it on the Facebook page. Okay. And then what we would do is we would Facebook the page and tweet out the page. And maybe have a live stream on that page as well, on Joe Biden's whole record, exposing the whole record. And then keep on doing that for the 4 months that we have, until more and more people know about his record, more and more people echo what we have to say about his record. We would have to be scrupulous, though. No shading or slanting of the record. Everything has to be as factual as possible. It's like...
No nasty words.
Yeah, it's like, he voted for the Iraq War. He was instrumental in advocating for and passing the crime bill. Okay. He managed the judicial proceedings for Clarence Thomas that resulted in Clarence Thomas getting onto the court. He denied a number of other women from coming forward, in order to testify against Clarence Thomas, and to state that he had done similar things to them, as Anita Hill said that he'd done to her. There's a record there, that Joe Biden did. When he ran in 1988, he plagiarized. It wasn't the first time that he plagiarized. His plagiarism goes back to school. And he had a tendency to plagiarize a number of times in his career from other people. That might not seem serious to people.
The school thing.
But it's a serious offense. It's a serious offense. It's stealing the words, of an author. Joanne says, ignorant voters. Deborah Wilson says, my favorite thing right now is talking true shit about weekend tea Bidens. Steve DeVore says, but Democrats in many ways are as bad as Trumpers. They don't listen to anything. They know it all. Deborah says, says left-wingers on FB can't affect shit. We'll see about that. Sandy says, I still belong to a lot of groups. Kay says, any seniors or people of color that vote for Biden are nuts. Joanne says, heard the package included bailout for churches. I don't know. I didn't see that yet. It may include a bailout for churches. As long as it's for all churches, including mosques, I guess that's not the worst thing that could happen. And Jim Bird says, already been downing Biden. Yes, but this would be part of a coordinated campaign, Jim. I'm sure you could make some very valuable contributions. Kay says, Bernie might hurt their power and will hurt their checkbooks. And Joanne said, had surgery on Wednesday, still recovering, and very bitchy tonight. Gee, I'm sorry to hear that, Joanne. But I wish you a speedy recovery. Sandy said, yes. And Lana said, do we set up a group? But if Biden does get the nomination with shitty numbers, he more likely will have to make more promises. So, if we can hurt his numbers between now, okay, and the time of the nomination, he may be likely to have to make more promises. But on the other hand, since Biden lies all the time, we all have to consider, is he really going to keep his promises?
Ask.
If we thought he would keep his promises, then some of us might be willing to negotiate with him now in return for some concessions. But the reason why people think it's, really stupid to try to negotiate with the guy is because everybody thinks he's such a liar anyway. Okay, now, clearly, he's not as bad a liar as Donald Trump is. But of all the candidates who were running, he was probably the next worst liar, except for Mayor Buttigieg, I would say. It was a close run between the two of those guys. I mean, Buttigieg was like a stone-cold liar, I thought. Liar, dissembler. I don't know why anybody liked him. I mean, people are very cynical about politicians, candidates. I know they think that most of the politicians are dishonest, okay, and they can't believe any of them. But then people go into a primary race, and suddenly they like a Buttigieg, and they can't sense that this guy is artificial and dishonest, and Madison Avenue, and Big Five consulting firms. That he doesn't have an honest bone in his body. And they just can't see this. I admit, I don't understand. And that was true with Trump. So many people believe Trump when he gives them, his malarkey. I mean, we all see it, we all know it. But there must be 35% of the voters, who don't know it. And the other 15% who, are still maybe getting close to voting for him, they're willing to accept his lying, but they know he's a liar. Carmen says, well, Dr. Joe, you could pretend to be a Pentecostal preacher on Zoom. When people tune in, you could run down Biden voting and policy horrors. That'll give him the Holy Ghost. Yeah, I could go on Zoom and pretend to be a priest of the Flying Spaghetti Monster. Then maybe I could apply for some federal aid for my Congregational Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster. Have you guys ever heard of the Flying Spaghetti Monster?
Yes.
Bonnie's heard of the Flying Spaghetti Monster. Lana says, this would be a group effort. Do we have enough for a group? Lana says, I like it. Sandy says, we basically share articles anyway. Well, our task is going to be to get these articles out to other places. To get the real record out to other places and not just talk to ourselves. Get it spread as widely as we possibly can. Steve says, if you want to get your disability, you got to get a lawyer. Contact me and I'll hunt down the lawyer that did it for me. Kay says, I like that idea, Joe. Let's move to a country that loves people. Well, I don't know if there are countries that actually love people, but there are countries that care about their people. It seems like Denmark actually cares about its people.
We could share a big boat.
Yeah. Jim Bird says, if Biden gets a nomination with shitty polling, he's more likely to make promises. I guess I went through this before. K. Clark Ryan says, Finland. Yeah, Finland cares about its people. They really do. Piers Norway cares about its people. Lana says, Stephen DeVore, they're in serious denial. Carmen says, Jingoists won't allow us to leave for better countries. Steve Gonzo says Twitter is decimating the Bernie bros. They're not done yet. So let's take down Joe. We did it to HRC. We can do it again. Kay says, Carmen, other better countries don't want us either. In fact, the Joe Bro blocked me today. A Joe Bro. Yeah. First time ever. Yeah, maybe we should start talking about the Joe Bros. Yeah, Joanne asks, think the MMT experts could be louder and stronger in public platforms. Well, Stephanie is everywhere now, and it seems to me is being very successful in spreading the ideas, Cave MMT. Steve Gonzo says 20,000 nationally. Yeah, 20,000 nationally. That's right. And by tomorrow, it'll be at least 22,000, maybe 23,000. As I said, 7 times more than the 9/11 fatalities. Kay says, DeWine has done a pretty good job handling it here in Ohio. Yeah, and DeWine's a Republican. There are some Republicans who care about their people. There really are. There are a few. Even some of them who are pretty conservative. DeWine's pretty conservative. But when it comes right down to it, he's not a skunk. He's not a barbarian. Carmen says, your commentary on the article is on point. That's why I love sharing and inviting your stuff. Thank you, Carmen. Anna says, my sister and family are petrified in New Jersey. Also said no food on the shelves at the supermarket. We don't have that situation here. The supermarkets seem to be still... Well, Trader Joe's seems to be fine at this point. We were in Costco on Monday. They were being very careful about social distancing. I was in Costco on Monday. They were very well supplied with food. There were no shortages of those that I saw. They were either low or out of certain paper products, like the TP. They did have some tissues, though, for the first time in a long time. There were big boxes, of Kleenex.
But they were more expensive.
No, they were actually a pretty good price, but I thought that the Trader Joe small boxes of tissues would suffice us for a while. That we could wait and hope that there would be more paper products on the shelves coming soon. What I didn't find on the shelves there was the disinfecting wipes.
Yes, and white.
Of course, hand sanitizers are out. We would like to make our own sanitizer, but we've had difficulty finding the alcohol a part of the recipe. We have the aloe vera, and we have the tea tree oil part of the recipe, but we don't have the alcohol part. We've only got some 50% alcohol here, and that's not enough. Carr says the virus is leveling off in New York, but Cuomo said there could be a second or third wave coming up. Yeah, Cuomo was right about that. He's right. Sandy said, she's right, I'm having a hard time getting groceries. Joanne says, neither Trump nor Biden will represent the working poor. The working poor, and homeless, or the environment. That's right. And we need somebody right away who's going to do something about the climate emergency and Medicare for all and the job guarantee. We need all those things. Catherine Tokarska says, anybody listen to Chomsky the other day? Thinks electing Biden is necessary. I heard that part of his talk. I can't say he's wrong. Okay, I mean, I can't say he's wrong. And the reason why I can't say he's wrong is because I do think that if Biden were president, when this, when he got word, okay, of this disease from China, that he and people in his administration would have known enough to act and to listen to the science. I don't think they would have tried to paper it over. And I think that is one difference. And so the point is, if we see now, I don't know how many people are going to die as a result of this crisis. They're currently saying, well, maybe as few as 60,000 will die, and Trump is, oh, well, we've been so successful, we've contained it to 60,000. That's probably 40 or 50,000 more that have died than have had to die by this time. Trump has probably already cost us 50,000 lives. And now Biden might cost us 50,000 lives, okay, in other ways, but I think not, okay, in this way. It's a very hard calculation because you really have to start thinking about how many lives will each of these guys cost. I think Chomsky was also assuming that there's no coming back for Bernie, that his campaign is ended. I think Chomsky was, being a realist, thinking that there's no way Biden is going to melt down before the nomination. Now, we know from watching Biden that by now he's incompetent, so we're going to have an incompetent president for some time. That will be very dangerous for the world and very dangerous for the United States, though. So I think what Chomsky was saying is that if it's a choice between electing Biden and Trump, then electing Biden is still necessary. But at this point, that's not necessarily the choice. Biden has not been nominated yet. And it's still 4 months until the convention.
Maybe they're going to sneak Hillary in.
It may be 5 months until the convention. Well, I'll tell you, Hillary would be dangerous, okay, in other ways. But there's no way a pandemic would have gotten by her.
Right.
No way.
Right.
Never. On the other hand, she might already have bombed the hell out of poor Venezuela.
Oh, yeah.
She. Steve Gonzo says, Operation Expose Joe. Kay says, I did hear Chomsky say that, but I will not vote for him. What's a good anti-Joe article, Steve says? I don't know, but I'm sure we can find one. If we set out searching, we can probably find some very good ones inside of 2 or 3 hours. If a bunch of us should search, and we can basically collate what's in those and develop his whole record and not miss anything important.
Somebody said recently, how many things can you say Joe Biden is going to do for you? Just tell me 2 basic.
Right. And
couldn't come
that,
to anything.
okay, is one way to go about it, but all I want to do is go about it on his record. I just want to point up his record and say, look, can we nominate someone with a record like this? I mean, what does he have to go up against Donald Trump with? Carmen says, to how many groups are we allowed to share before we get thrown into fascist book jail? I don't know. I don't think there are clear guidelines like that. I think Facebook likes to throw people into jail. So that's why they don't give us, clear guidelines. Like, say, for example, if you share to more than 20 groups, then we're going to then we're going to throw you into jail. If they said that, what we'd all do is share to 19 groups, okay, and not to 20 groups. But the truth is, they don't want us to share it to 19 groups either. In other words, they just don't really want us to share as much. Now, I don't know why. I know they want people to share, but they just don't want us to share as much. Sandy says, do a search on Joe Biden's record. Yeah, probably the first thing to do is go to Wikipedia. But I know, I read a recent article that went through Biden's record. I just have to dredge it up from my links. I have links to some things already. Cora says, what? Yeah, Bonnie's telling me it's getting late. Okay, it's 11:30. I've been on for 2 hours and 15 minutes. So, folks, I'm going to say good night. I think a few of us ought to get together on, on Messenger and decide whether there was enough support here tonight to launch a group to do this. Okay, or whether we ought to have a special live stream on it and invite as many people to the live stream as possible with, some advance notice. And, then if we can get 30, 40, 50 people to the live stream, maybe we'll have enough to conclude that we have enough strength to try to do this. Sandy said, but could we use articles as well? Well, what we should probably do is to produce a document of our own with all the pieces of his record on it. And then each of the items should be linked to articles backing that item up that people can check on.
Keep it short.
No, we can't keep it short. It has to be all the major things he's done wrong.
Yeah, I meant that. The part that you say is wrong, here's a link.
Right.
That's all.
Right. Oh, yeah. I agree. Deborah Wilson, weekend at Biden's. Kay says, would anyone really trust him to keep those promises? Off the lying he did in this campaign, I mean, he denied things. He looked right into the camera and he denied the truth of things that there were multiple video clips on. When it came to his record on supporting Social Security, for example, that immediately comes to mind. He simply denied things that he did. He just bold-faced lied about them. And on a number of occasions during their campaign, that was his strategy. When someone called him out for something he had in fact done for which there was video evidence and documentary evidence, he simply denied it. Lied right to our faces during the campaign. Lied to our faces about his civil rights record. And Bonnie is telling me that I gotta say good night. And so, okay, I am gonna say good night. Everybody have a really good night. I'm off tomorrow, and I'm going to see you on Monday night during the 9 o'clock hour. Thank you very much for coming, for all the comments, for all of the discussion, and for entertaining me tonight. And giving me a sense of hope, keeping me in a hopeful mood. Yep. I'm ending the broadcast, folks. See you Monday.